Hey, good morning. Welcome to the Belong Collective. So excited that you're here with us for this digital gathering. A few announcements. The Belong Collective is a Jesus-centered community practicing the way of love for the good of all. We're so excited you're here. TheBelongCollective.org is where you can find out more. Go there, browse around. You can see our calendar. Probably the biggest thing we have coming up is that this coming Sunday, next Sunday, we are meeting in person at Hershey Lodge. And then on April 17th for Easter Sunday, we are in person at Hershey Lodge. That's exciting. Hopefully you can invite your friends to Easter, invite your family to Easter. We're hoping it'll be a big gathering of the Belong Collective on April 17th for Easter at Hershey Lodge, 10 a.m. Be there. Big news. If you did not see where we did the survey results and where we shared some news, or if you weren't there last Sunday, from May, June, July, August, all 4 of those months, every single Sunday, we're going to be at Midtown Cinema at 10 a.m. We have a location for 4 months straight and potentially beyond, but it's going to kind of be this little experiment that we're going to do for our community where we're going to meet every single Sunday, and we're going to be at that space. Really cool space. Really excited about the space. We're meeting in a theater. We're obviously going to have a projector, be able to tap into the projector, the same projector that shows the movies. We got a sound system that's already built in there that we might be using. Like, there's just so much good about that space. Really excited. There's going to be coffee again. Yeah, some of you, have been bringing your own coffee, but there's going to be coffee on site. More details are coming about that. We'll talk about that. But anyway, either way, we're excited about it, and we hope you're excited about it. Thanks for being with us today. Exciting to have you here in this format digitally, and hope that this Sunday, this digital gathering, speaks to you.
It's all a plan, ever flowing on streams of love for you and me. Even as I'm leaving what's behind, running to be the next in line. Some will say I've wasted what I already had. Going forward is a better state of mind. All I am is who I want to be. We'll keep on growing when we raise a hand, accept the calling, saying yes to opportunity. First in line. Yesterdays and memories are made every day. There's been a path beneath your feet this whole time. All I am is what I'm meant to be.
Good morning, Belong Collective. We are continuing our series titled Jesus Centered. So we're looking at stories from the Bible, from the life of Jesus, and we are attempting to understand why our faith is Jesus centered, or even just deeper, like a deeper understanding of the stories of Jesus and how they center our faith. People center their faith on a lot of things in Christianity. Some are good, some are not so good. I would say, in my experience, we can sometimes center our faith on dogma, which is just like a set of beliefs. Maybe let's even just say the 10 Commandments. Let's say you centered your faith on the 10 Commandments. Not a bad thing to center your faith on, but also maybe not the best thing. Sometimes we center our faith on the Bible. But the question becomes, if you center your faith on the Bible, what parts of the Bible are you centering your faith on? Because, wow, there's a lot of things that are problematic within the Bible, right? And so when we say we center our faith on Jesus, what we're really saying is we're saying like Jesus is the reason, right? Like Jesus is the center. And when we say that, we're saying like the teachings of Jesus, the life of Jesus, the way he spoke, the way he lived, the way he even died, right? Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. All of these factors are elements of teaching that can have a deep impact if we choose to live that way. But sometimes we say our faith and the center of our faith is this, that, or another thing that really don't have anything to do with Jesus, or even worse, that Jesus undid. For example, like Jesus goes through a whole litany of things in the Sermon on the Mount where he says, you've heard it said. When he says you've heard it said, he's talking about the Bible. He's saying you've heard it said in the Bible this way, but I tell you this. And so he undoes something. And some would use the language of fulfilled, but by fulfilled, he's saying he's moved the ball down the road, like the ball's moved down the field, right? And so when we think of our faith, we think of it being Jesus-centered. When we respond to something, when we consider how we're going to respond to something, we should be thinking like, not the cheesy thing of like, what would Jesus do? But what did Jesus do, right? How did Jesus live? What did Jesus teach? These things can really help shape us. And so we're looking at a variety of stories about Jesus, teachings about Jesus, and situations that Jesus found himself in. So today there's this amazing part where Peter comes to Jesus. We're actually in Matthew 18 today. If you have a Bible, you can open it up, or you can pull open your phone, whatever you prefer. Matthew 18 verse 21 is where we're going to start. And I'm reading from my old Bible that I've had since I was in I think high school. So you can see it's really weathered. It's also the old New International Version. So it's okay if your translation's a little bit different. Sometimes we read from the New Living Translation at the Belong Collective. Sometimes we read from the New NIV. I should do a whole video on translations and why that matters someday. But for right now, if your translation says something a little different or reads a little different, that's okay. No big deal. Here we go. All right. Verse 21. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, Lord, how many times shall I forgive my brother when he sins against me? Up to 7 times? In essence, we've all had this question, how many times should I let that person get away with that, right? How many times should I forgive that person? That person has wronged me multiple times, and I've forgiven them 6 times, but I will not forgive them the 7th time, right? And 7 is this number of completeness, and there is a lot of language to this all the way back to Cain in Genesis 4. So this is kind of in some ways a reference to Genesis 4 and forgiveness, and a lot of different symbolism in here that we're not going to get into. But the point of the matter is, have you ever got to the point to where you've wondered, how many times am I going to need to forgive this person? And this is not to say that we're against healthy boundaries, right? Forgiveness is a posture of our heart towards somebody, right? That doesn't mean we can't forgive somebody while also saying, my posture of my heart is not going to be embittered toward this person, but the posture of proximity, like how close we're going to be to one another, has to change, right? Because people can become toxic and they can hurt you, and you can forgive them for that hurt. But that does not mean that the proximity of the relationship, the depth of the relationship remains the same. And so Peter isn't really asking that, though. What Peter's kind of asking is like, how far do we really got to go in this whole forgiving and forgiving people? You know, you have to understand what Peter's coming out of is this legalistic mindset of holding, as he's entering into Jesus's idea of forgiveness, he's trying to apply this legalistic value, if you will, of like a Pharisee mindset to it. He's like, okay, I see you're more forgiving than the Pharisees, but at what point do we stop forgiving people? At what point do we say tax collectors have just done too much wrong to deserve my forgiveness, right? Or at what point does this person, and which is hilarious, right? Because some of the disciples are former tax collectors, right? And so he might even be looking at another disciple, thinking about this. There's a lot of backstory even in this very, very question, in that, you know, how many times do I have to forgive my brother when he sins against me? We've all asked this question. Like my kids at a very young age ask this question when their brother or sister offends them. Like, we ask it in our own ways. We might not say forgiveness, but we might say like, I don't want to play with him anymore. I'm not going to we tend to be the type of people that can hold grudges. Maybe that's not you, but Peter is wondering, like, when do I get the freedom to hold a grudge, to say I am done with that person and I don't forgive that person. That person hurt me. This is what Jesus says back. I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Now, that 77 times can also be translated 70 times 7, which is obviously higher than 77 times. But the point of the matter is what Jesus is saying is he's saying, no, you don't get to not forgive somebody. Like that's what he's saying. He's not saying keep count, keep a tally, make some check boxes, and once you get to 77, then you can stop. Or once you get to whatever 70 times 7 is, which I'm not going to do on the fly right now, but whatever 70 times 7 is, once you get there, then you can harbor some bitterness for that person and refuse to let go of the harm they've done to you. That's not what Jesus is saying. What Jesus is saying is he's using a very numbers had a lot of meaning and importance in the ancient world, and the idea of seven being the number of completeness, but 70 times 7 was like this, even bigger number of completeness. And he's just meaning, to say, in a lot of ways, like infinity, like we don't stop forgiving people. Like this way, my way, the Jesus way, the Jesus-centered approach is the approach that says, no, we're going to keep forgiving. And it's going to be hard, but we're going to keep doing it, because when we do that, that's where life is found. That's where transformation happens. When we see somebody who continues to harm or continues to hurt or continues to let us down, and we choose forgiveness, that's where transformative power happens. And again, I want to say all of this to say, this does not mean you cannot forgive at a distance. All right. I have plenty of people I've forgiven and also had to create healthy boundaries and a distance. Let's get into the actual parable that Jesus then says, because Jesus says this, but then he goes immediately into a parable. And he says this: therefore, the kingdom of heaven is like a king who wanted to settle accounts with his servants. As he began the settlement, a man who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him. Since he was not able to pay, the master ordered that he and his wife and children and all that he had be sold to repay the debt. Now, this individual owed 10,000 talents. For reference, 1 denarii is 1 day's wages, and 6,000 denarii is 1 talent, and this person owed 10,000 talents. That is, I believe, 60 million days' work. Okay, so we say that to say what Jesus is doing is using some rabbinic hyperbole. First of all, no one would be able to take this line of credit out with a king. There's no king who's going to give this much of a line of credit. But Jesus is using what's called rabbinic hyperbole, and he does this in parables quite regularly, actually. It would have not just been done by him, but it would have been done by the other rabbis of his day. And so Jesus is using in this teaching this like fanciful, like even like just unreal situation. No king is going to loan this much money to someone, let alone to someone who has no capacity to pay it back. And it's clear he does not have the capacity to pay this back. And so, because he doesn't have the capacity to pay the 60 million days of work back, him and his wife and his children and everything he owns is going to be sold. So he's about to be sold into slavery. What does he do? The servant falls on his knees before him. Be patient with me, he begged. I will pay back everything. Here's the deal. Everyone listening to the story is like, there's no way you're going to pay back everything. There's no possible chance you're going to pay back that much money. Like, that's just known not only by the hearers of the story for the first time, but also Jesus knows that as he's painting this picture, as he's making up these details to the story, right? The servant's master took pity on him. The king took pity on him. He canceled the debt and he let him go. Wow. The king, who was owed 60 million days of work, took pity on him and let him go. Canceled the debt. What happens next? That's the end of the story. No, it's not. There's a bigger point to the story, which I think is really important for us. Really important for us as we think about forgiveness. This person with this newfound freedom goes out into the world. How liberating is it when you experience something like this? This is like winning the lottery. Like, this guy was about to have his wife and kids and himself sold into slavery, everything he owned lost, and spend the rest of his life as a slave. And what does he do? Here's what it says. But when that servant went out, he found one of his fellow servants, because the king has servants and the servant has servants in this case. He found one of his servants who owed him 100 denarii. Okay, just a reminder, denarii. 1 denarii is 1 day wages. 100 denarii would be 100 days of work. Can someone pay off 100 days of work? Yeah, that's doable. You can get that done in less than 4 months. Okay, so he found one of his fellow servants who owed him 100 denarii. He grabbed him and began to choke him. This newly liberated free man starts choking this person who owes him 100 denarii. And he says, pay back what you owe me. This servant who's choking him says, pay back what you owe me, as he's just been released. 60 million days. There is a man who owes him 100 days of labor, and he's choking him. What does the person being choked say? It says he fell on his knees and begged, be patient with me and I will pay you back. Jesus is laying these two things down next to each other. One person falls on their knees and says, be patient, I'll pay you back, even though there's no way, no possible way that he could pay the king back. So that servant goes out, finds a servant who owes him, and that servant falls on his knees, says, be patient, I'll pay you back. And this person can actually pay the debt. This is a payable debt. It's possible to get this money back. It might require a little bit of patience, but it's possible to get this debt paid. But he refused. He refused. Just want you to think about that for a second, that language. He refused. The king didn't refuse, but the servant, as he goes out, he refuses to forgive or even be patient with the debt. Instead, he went off and had the man thrown into prison until he could pay the debt. So he has the man thrown into prison. Now, as this is happening, obviously the king has multiple servants. There's other servants watching this take place. They get word of this. They see it happen. So it says, when the other servants saw what happened, they were greatly distressed and went and told their master, the king, everything that had happened. So now word gets back to the king and the master that, hey, look what has taken place. You forgave all this. And then he went out and had this person thrown into prison. Wow. For 100 days, for 100 denarii. And then what happens next? What happens next is the master called the servant in. Hey, let's chat, right? Things that I've heard are that you are out here throwing people in jail after I forgave you, right? Like, that needs to be a conversation. Let's talk about this. Here's what the master says. You wicked servant, I canceled all that debt of yours because you begged me to. Shouldn't you have had mercy on your fellow servant just as I had on you? In anger, his master turned him over to the jailers to be tortured until he should pay back all he owed. This is how my heavenly Father will treat each of you unless you forgive your brother from your heart. Now, I want to be clear about some things here. Parables are meant to evoke emotion. They are meant to lay two things down next to each other. They are not meant to be taken literally. So some people look at this story and they're like, see, God is an angry God. God is angry with you when you don't forgive your brother. Look, see, even Jesus says God is angry. That's a fine conclusion to come to if you want to come to that conclusion. I don't necessarily think that is the emphasis of the story. The emphasis of the story is that God is so incredibly merciful that God relieves our debts. God forgives so generously that no matter how much debt we've racked up, right? Whatever we want to consider that debt to be, no matter how many wrongs we've done, no matter how difficult of a background we've had, no matter how much forgiveness we are in need of, there is unlimited supply of forgiveness. How amazing is that? But part of the reality of entering into that forgiveness is saying, I choose to live a life of forgiveness. I choose to go out and forgive those who wrong me, those who hurt me, those who sin against me. And so it is this acceptance of forgiveness, twofold, for myself, but also for my way of being in the world. And when we don't do that, when we don't do that second part, when we just think we can receive the forgiveness without ever attempting to step into what it means to live as image bearers of God. We are supposed to live the way in which this master lives, the way in which we would release debt for somebody. That we wouldn't be so preoccupied with the hurt done to us, with the debt that we're going to be taking on, but we would see the human being. How amazing is that, right? To become like the servant is to receive the gift, but then to go out and refuse to see the opportunity to forgive even the smallest of debts. And so, what this means for us today. Forgiveness is hard. Forgiveness hurts. It is hard to let go when people hurt you, wrong you in deep ways or even in small ways. What I think the Jesus-centered way is of forgiveness, it is like a light switch. There are days that are going to be brighter and where forgiveness is going to be something you accept and jump right into. And there are going to be dark days where you struggle to forgive, where you struggle to let go. And that might just be one hurt you've experienced in your life. Forgiveness is not a finalizing thing. We don't work that way as human beings. Some people are just forgive and forget. if it were that easy, right? Not to mention forgiving and forgetting does all kinds of harm and is all kinds of unhelpful, right? But even if we could, we don't forgive and forget. We forgive and we remember. And it's not that we remember to hold it against somebody. It's that we forgive and we're the type of people that remember. When we're hurt, it shapes us. And so how do we forgive it even as the hurt shapes us? That's the challenge, right? Like, when we go through deep hurts or even small hurts, it has impact on our lives. We don't deny that fact. That's something we embrace. That thing back there hurt me, and I chose forgiveness. And the next day, I have to choose forgiveness again because that hurt might still be there, or the pain, I might feel it tomorrow. And when I do, I'm going to choose forgiveness. And again, some days are going to be easier to choose forgiveness. It's going to be super bright, and other days are going to be hard to choose forgiveness, and it's going to feel dark. But we are forgiven. And so we strive to choose forgiveness. That is the challenge of this story. When we think about being Jesus-centered, we are the type of people who choose forgiveness. You know, probably one of the best metaphors for refusing to forgive somebody is the idea of drinking poison, thinking that you're going to hurt somebody else. When we refuse to forgive and we choose resentment, we choose hate, we choose bitterness, what we're really doing is drinking a poison for our soul, and we think it's going to harm the other person. We think we're getting even with them. We think we're going to settle the score, right? But really, all we're doing is hurting ourselves. All we're doing is allowing that toxicity to spread through us and impact us. And you know these people. You know these people that only are ever bitter because they've been hurt. And they've been hurt maybe a lot of times. And you could be empathetic about that, right? Like, you can understand. But you also see that, like, they've chosen to live in that moment and refuse to forgive, and they can't move past it, and they don't know why. And it's because forgiveness is what helps us move past it. Now, really quickly, a caveat to forgiveness. Forgiveness does not mean there are no consequences. There are some pastors, for example, who would say, and I've been in conversations about this before in my time in ministry, and it has been challenging. Even as I think back of certain rooms I've been in and certain conversations I've had, it's just wild to think that this would be a way we would argue forgiveness. But where a husband is abusing his wife and someone says, well, you need to forgive him and take him back. To be clear, this is not what I'm saying. You might need to forgive him and get a divorce. And I'm a pastor saying that. Because it might be that this person has violated your trust so much. Their unfaithfulness to you by violating you in this way is not something that can be restored. And that is terrible and tragic. But you can forgive without saying yes to remaining in that relationship. And it's sad that some pastors have refused to say that. It's sad that some pastors have said forgiveness is just taking him back. And if you don't take him back, you haven't forgiven him. The reality of forgiveness is that I don't know if you've forgiven somebody. I can maybe tell by the way you're harboring bitterness, or you talk toward somebody, or you treat that person. But it's a posture of your spirit to let go, to refuse to carry that debt around with you. And then if you choose to set up boundaries, refuse to be in a relationship with somebody, those might be very fair conclusions for someone who has been harmed or consistently harmed by somebody. It is not that you cannot forgive and set healthy boundaries. You can totally forgive and also say no. So even as we hear this story and the challenge laid forth in it, because many of us do harbor bitterness, maybe we're even thinking about some things that we could say, okay, I need to let that go. Like, as we think about that, let us not think that we have to remain in toxic spaces or in toxic places or in toxic relationships. We should get support. We should find people who can help us. And yes, we give people second chances. I'm not saying we don't forgive and also remain in relationships. Some of those are the deepest relationships. When you have the power of failure and restoration, oh my goodness, those relationships have a certain depth to them. But restoration and forgiveness, reconciliation and forgiveness are two separate things. And what Jesus is talking about here is forgiving, is releasing that debt that person has, and that grip that they have on your heart because of the harm they've done to you. And so my challenge to you this morning, may you go and release debts and forgive expansively, even the deep harm that has been done to you. May you have more days where the light switch dimmer is bright, and may God support you and give you the power, the courage, the patience, and the love through it all. Amen.
When I find myself in times of trouble, Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. And in my hour of darkness, she is standing right in front of me, speaking words of wisdom, let it be. Let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be. Whisper words of wisdom, let it be. And when the broken-hearted people living in the world agree, there will be an answer, let it be. But though we may be parted, there is still a chance that we may see. There will be an answer, let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be, let it be. There will be an answer, let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be. Let it be, let it be, let it be. Whisper words of wisdom, let it be. When the night is cloudy, there is still a light that shines on me. Shine on till tomorrow, let it be. Wake up to the sound of music. Mother Mary comes to me, speaking words of wisdom. Let it be. 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 Whisper words of wisdom. Let it be. Let it